The steel door clanged shut, and the echo bounced off the concrete walls. Michael's hands shook as he held the folded paper that marked his release. After a year trapped inside the chaos of Rikers Island, freedom was finally within reach. But even as the gate was supposed to open, a fight broke out just a few feet away. 2 inmates lunged at each other, fists flying, while guards rushed in with pepper spray and batons. The air filled with screams, the sharp burn of gas, and the confusion of men caught between survival and escape. Michael stumbled backward, his chest tight. He was only one step away from freedom. But now, it looked like he might not make it out alive. How did it come to this moment? How did one man go from his first day at intake, scared and unsure, to standing at the edge of release with chaos exploding around him? To understand that, we need to go back to the very beginning. Michael was 23 when the cops first picked him up. He wasn't a hardened criminal, just a kid from Brooklyn who made one mistake too many. It was a cold night in December when he was caught driving a stolen car with 2 friends. The sirens came out of nowhere, painting the streets blue and red, and in a blink, Michael's life changed. The arrest was humiliating. Cold handcuffs biting into his wrists. Neighbors watching as he was shoved into the back of a squad car. His mother's face flashing in his mind, disappointed, hurt, the weight of shame pressing down heavier than the steel around his hands. But it wasn't until he got to the courthouse that reality began to set in. The judge denied bail, and suddenly Michael was told he would be sent to Rikers Island. He had heard stories about the place, how violent, overcrowded, and dangerous it was, but he never thought he'd see it for himself. Now there was no choice. The bus ride across the bridge to Rikers felt endless, windowed. He was caged, air heavy with the smell of sweat and fear. Some of the men rode silently, heads down. Others bragged loudly about their charges, trying to act tough. Michael sat still, gripping the edge of his seat, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. When they finally arrived at intake, it was worse than anything he imagined. A huge hall filled with men of every shape and size, guards barking orders, papers shuffled, shoes and belts taken away. Michael was fingerprinted, photographed, and handed a thin orange jumpsuit that smelled like bleach. They told him to strip down, shower, and put it on. From that moment on, he was just another inmate in a sea of faces. The first night was the hardest. The dorm was overcrowded. Bunks stacked so close together you could hear the guy next to you breathing. Men shouted, argued, and cursed deep into the night. Somewhere in the back, a fight broke out, and Michael froze, listening to the sick thuds of fists against flesh and the shouts of guards rushing in. Sleep was impossible. Every sound felt like a warning. Days turned into weeks. Michael learned to move carefully, to watch what he said, to avoid eye contact when trouble brewed. He saw men beaten over a stolen snack, fights break out over space on a bench, and guards slam inmates against walls for backtalk. But there were calmer days too. Moments when time seemed to stretch endlessly. Men played cards, swapped stories, or just sat staring at the walls, waiting for something to change. For Michael, the scariest part was how normal it all began to feel. He got used to the routine, head count, meals, lock-in, repeat. He started recognizing faces, knowing who to stay away from and who he could trust. But underneath, he never stopped counting the days, never stopped imagining the moment he'd finally hear the word release. And then came the day he thought he was free. After 12 long months, he was called out, paperwork in hand, heart pounding with relief. He could almost smell the air outside, taste freedom on his tongue. But just as he stood at the threshold, the dorm erupted. A fight broke out between 2 rival groups, chaos exploding like wildfire. Guards stormed in with shields, pepper spray filling the room, men coughing and stumbling, fists still flying. Michael clutched his papers, frozen in place, the door to freedom just ahead. But in that moment, with gas burning his eyes and fists swinging all around him, He couldn't tell if he was walking into freedom or another trap. And then, the blast of pepper spray made Michael's eyes water until he could barely see. The release papers in his hand crumpled as he dropped to his knees, coughing. The noise was deafening. Shouts from inmates, the clang of batons against shields, and the orders of guards trying to restore control. He had dreamed of walking out quietly, of hugging his mother again, of breathing free air. But now, his release felt like a cruel trick, dangled in front of him only to be snatched away. A guard yelled for him to get back, as if he was still just another inmate caught in the chaos. Michael tried to speak, tried to show his papers, but his words came out broken, swallowed by coughs. Someone shoved past him, swinging wildly, and he felt his shoulder slam against the cold wall. For a moment, he thought he was done for. Then, just as fast as it began, the fight started to die down. More guards poured in, pinning men to the ground, dragging others out by their collars. The smoke of pepper spray lingered, stinging every breath. Michael clutched his chest, dizzy, but one thought kept him standing. I can't mess this up. Not now. Not at the door. Hours later, after the chaos settled, Michael was finally escorted out. The guards didn't apologize, didn't explain. To them, he was just one less name to manage. But to Michael, it was everything. He stepped through the gates, the heavy air of Rikers Island, replaced by the cool bite of freedom. The city skyline shimmered in the distance. For the first time in a year, he inhaled deeply, and it wasn't prison air. Still, freedom didn't feel like he imagined. His clothes hung loose, his body thinner than before, and his mind heavy with memories he didn't want to carry. The bus ride away from Rikers was quiet. No cages this time, no orange jumpsuit, but the silence was strange. Every bump of the road reminded him of where he had been and how close he came to never leaving at all. When the bus finally stopped, Michael's mother was there waiting. She hugged him so tightly it hurt, but he didn't care. Tears burned his eyes, and for the first time in months, he let them fall. The reunion was sweet, but the road ahead wasn't easy. Being free didn't erase the time he had spent locked away. Old friends came around, some pushing him back toward the same life that landed him behind bars. Nights were the hardest, dreams of sirens, metal doors, and fights that never seemed to end. Michael often woke up drenched in sweat, still feeling the burn of pepper spray in his lungs. But he also had new determination. He had survived intake, the endless routines, the fights, the lockdowns, and the madness of release day. He refused to let it be for nothing. He wanted a job, a fresh start, a life that didn't end in another cold cell. His mother's smile gave him strength, even when the world outside seemed just as unforgiving as the one he left behind. Weeks turned into months. Michael found small work delivering packages, saving every dollar he could. He stayed away from old corners, from faces that whispered trouble. But Rikers was never far from his mind. He carried it with him like a scar, reminders of overcrowded bunks, sleepless nights, and the endless sound of steel doors slamming shut. Sometimes, when he walked past the East River, he looked across toward the island. From a distance, Rikers looked almost quiet, just another piece of the city. But Michael knew better. He knew the chaos, the fear, the strange rhythm of life behind those walls. He knew how it felt to be swallowed by that place, and how rare it was to come out standing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Michael sat alone on a park bench. Children laughed in the distance, their voices sharp and free. He closed his eyes, listening, letting it wash over him. For the first time since stepping out, he felt the weight begin to lift. He wasn't just an ex-inmate. He was a survivor. But survival came with a question he couldn't shake. He had gone from intake to release, seen every corner of Rikers, and walked back out. Now the real test began. Could he build a life strong enough to stay out? Or would the pull of old mistakes drag him back through those gates again? Michael looked at the horizon, his release papers tucked deep in his pocket, creased but still whole. He whispered to himself, a promise, soft but steady. I'm not going back. And with that, he stood, stepping into a world that was his again, fragile, uncertain, but finally free.